I'm glad to be with you. We could talk about a lot of things. We could talk about the healthcare crisis that we're facing. We could talk about bid rigging. But I think what we really want to talk about tonight is Trump and what we can do with respect to the president and the chaos he's inflicted in our democracy. As the group that I spoke to in Barrington said, where do we find hope in this very, very difficult time for those of us who see the world the way we do? And I think there is hope out there, and the hope is in the fight. I think the word that I keep coming back to is we have to be willing to fight. Donald Trump, in my view, is not someone you can negotiate with. He's not somebody you can reason with. Chaos is at his core. Authoritarianism is at his core, and I'll explain why I believe that. It's not just a talking point. I'll explain why I believe that is who he is, and that's what his purpose is. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to try to fight back and the successes we've had, frankly. And I think we'll continue to have success because we're absolutely right on the law in the cases that we brought, including 3 cases right here in Rhode Island that I've been very proud to lead here. That is unprecedented. I don't believe there's ever been a multi-state on any topic filed in Rhode Island. We've already filed 3 involving the president, and we've had success so far in all of them. So let me thank you. I've got a great team. I have a great team, and they're still at the office working, frankly. All right, so let me talk about why I believe this fight is so necessary beyond the obvious. Most of the cases, as we'll talk about, that we have brought have involved federal funding. They have involved, for example, our most recent case, federal funding for libraries, mediation services, which are used, for example, by Care New England in their current labor dispute with some of their staff at Butler. They're relying on that mediation services, so really important to make sure that we don't have labor unrest and disruption. That's good for us, for labor, for all of us, and for obviously a big hospital system like Care New England. Really important governmental agency. And then another agency involving support for minority businesses. So that's one set of funding. We have gone to court over the president's termination of public health grants. So Rhode Island was in line to continue to pull down money already obligated by the Congress years ago, $31 million, to do things like getting children vaccinated and preparing for the next pandemic. You know, sometimes for those of us who didn't lose someone to COVID, and for it's entirely possible that someone in this group did, most of us probably had COVID, sometimes it's easy to forget that we wouldn't be gathering like this just 3 years ago. But the reality is it happened, and there's no reason to think it can't happen again. So those funds were designed to prepare for and be ready for that pandemic, and also to pay for laboratory equipment that in our Department of Health is badly outdated. $31 million for Rhode Island, $11 billion nationwide. And then the original funding case that we brought in Rhode Island, where the administration froze federal funding across the board, that was a third of our state budget. A third of our state budget is federally funded. So really important case that the president tried to, where the president tried to stop those billions of dollars. I think $5 billion for Rhode Island, literally one third of our budget, including Medicaid funds. The administration afterwards said, well, it didn't involve Medicaid. It did. We tried, our state government, our Medicaid office tried to draw down federal funds and couldn't do it that night. And we're told by the federal government, your money is on pause, it's under review, and we're not putting anything in writing. And you know, I was a federal prosecutor for a long time, and when someone tells you they're not going to put something in writing, they know that what they're doing is unlawful. So we brought cases in all of those areas. But to go up at 50,000 feet, what does that mean? What does it mean that the president froze those funds? This is what it means. Those are funds that the Congress, under its power of the purse, that we all learned about. Are there any teachers in the room, former teachers? Right? Did any of you teach social studies or something like civics? If you did, God bless you for teaching. But you know, you're teaching to your kids if you're talking about our government, you're talking about Congress having the power of the purse. They have other powers to pass the laws, but the power of the purse, a law, the budget, is as important in the Congress, more important, frankly, than our own General Assembly, as the senator knows, passes the budget, not the governor. The General Assembly passes the budget. So what the president has effectively done by taking these monies and saying, no, we're not going to spend them the way the Congress said we're going to spend them, he's effectively sidelined the Congress. It's as if the Congress doesn't matter, right? The Congress is effectively rendered powerless when it comes to money, which is the most important thing. And remember, these are tax dollars. We're about to pay our taxes on April 15th. They go down to Washington. Some of it is used to pay for the federal government, but it's also supposed to come back to us for things like healthcare and infrastructure, education, veterans, for law enforcement. These are the monies that the president froze. And the same is true of the public health funding, and the same is true of the library funding et al. And so by sidelining the Congress in that way, he's effectively taken one of the three branches of government out of the mix. And again, to go back to what we learned in school, or taught in school, or both, is that our framers, our founders, set up our government with three branches, none of whom had all the power, but they each had enough power to balance the others. So the judiciary and the legislative branch and the executive branch, none of them had all the power, and they were designed to put pressure on one another to keep us free and to preserve our democracy. So the president sidelines the Congress by stopping the flow of these monies, which he had no authority to do, and it's why we sued him, and it's why we've been so successful so far in stopping that freezing of funds. Now, to make it even worse, after we went to court and had success in Rhode Island, we filed those three cases in Rhode Island. As a group, the AGs have filed at least ones that we've been a part of, at least 11. There have been some where the funds weren't relevant to Rhode Island because we were smart enough to spend them, frankly. I think that all in, the AGs have filed 16 cases. But we filed 11 total, 3 in Rhode Island. So after we had success here and elsewhere, the president, the vice president, Elon Musk, the president's spokesperson, the Attorney General of the United States, just did it again today, has undermined the authority of those federal courts. There are two representatives that put in articles of impeachment. One for our own Judge John McConnell, who's been on the bench for at least a decade, and for a judge elsewhere. And so when the president's minions undermine the court in this way, what are they doing? They're sidelining the judiciary, okay? And you know, it is extraordinarily unusual for the federal court to be criticized in this way. I cannot remember in my experience, and I worked for the federal government in the Department of Justice here in Rhode Island, in the U.S. Attorney's Office. I was the U.S. Attorney, all in for about 15 years. It's extraordinary. Extraordinary. I mean, I can't imagine criticizing a federal judge. I never did it. Were we not happy with some of the rulings inside the office? Of course. That's the result of our adversarial system. But I have never criticized a jury. I have never criticized a grand jury. With the one exception, I have never criticized a judge, because that undermines our system. Well, the president has thrown that norm out the window, and by undermining the judiciary, undermines our confidence and acceptance of the judiciary's results. I'm sure most of us in this room didn't love Bush v. Gore, right? None of us in this room probably were thrilled when the Supreme Court ruled that there wasn't going to be another recount of the stupid hanging chads in Florida, but we accepted it and we moved on. Well, that's what the president is effectively beginning to say about a portion of the federal courts. Is what they're saying is corrupt, wrong. We don't have to listen to it. These judges don't have the power to do what they're doing. Of course they do. That's our system of judging. District court judges decide the issue in the first instance, and then the appellate courts decide it, and then the Supreme Court decides it. And the principle has been in place since 1803 with Judge John Marshall in Marbury versus Madison, that the court has the final say on what the law is. Well, the president, by undermining that principle, has sidelined the judiciary. And so what does that mean? That means that we have a man who wants all the power for himself. And there's only one way to describe that, and that is authoritarianism. And I don't say that lightly, because it's almost unimaginable to say it. But that is the reality. So, what's our response to those instincts? You know, when the president signals that he wants to make our law enforcement, maybe even our National Guard, become immigration officers. What is our response? Okay. Well, I'm glad to say that as Attorney General, we've been able to fight, literally in court. And so, I understand that many Americans who view the world the way I do, including people in this room, I suspect, feel powerless as this chaos comes out of Washington. And it's very frustrating to feel powerless. What I can tell you is that your attorneys general, in my office are your lawyers. Like, I don't have a client other than you. And so your lawyer is fighting for you, your group of lawyers, your law firm, the 23 of us together, the 23 AGs and our staffs. I will tell you, in my experience, is the biggest and best law firm in the country. And they're fighting for you every day. Around birthright citizenship, for example, we won that case. We won our funding freeze case. And I want to talk a little bit about that case again, because it demonstrates how good the lawyering is on your behalf. It's not me doing it, by the way. It's Adi and the rest of the team in Rhode Island. It's Sis James's team in New York. It's Kwame Raoul's team in Illinois. It's Rob Bonta's team in California. It's Matt Placken's team in New Jersey on that particular case. But I want to talk about that a little bit, because it demonstrates how well I think we're fighting for you. So the OMB case, as we call it, is when the President's Office of Management and Budget put in a across-the-board federal freeze, okay? And what that meant was, I already alluded to it, no more federal funding until each agency has a chance to review that funding to see whether it is in accordance with the President's executive orders, which were things like preventing, safeguarding Americans from invasion. You know, they were crazy. They were crazy. And so we call it the invasion executive order. And so we learned about that, not surprisingly, on social media. And my memory is about 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And so, you know, we saw this, spotted by one of my staff members. I saw it separately. You know, there was a back and forth by text in the office. Well, this looks significant. We should talk about this. We got on a phone call that evening. The attorneys general, collectively, to the 23 of us, got on a phone call that evening. And we agreed we were going to do something about it. And so the staffs worked through the night, literally through the night. We had the benefit of having California on the team. They were 3 hours behind, of course, and they could work later into the night, obviously, but our folks could get a few hours of sleep, and then we got back up in the morning. But by that afternoon, we had filed a complaint and a motion for a temporary restraining order, which Judge McConnell granted, stopping the president in his tracks in under 24 hours. That is, I will tell you, that is outstanding legal work. Outstanding legal work by those staffs. And I will tell you, that kind of work has been replicated across all of these cases. You know, take the public health funding case, for example, $31 million for Rhode Island. That would have been out of our, you know, our General Assembly would have had to find that $31 million, or we're not going to be vaccinating children the way we've been vaccinating children, or older Rhode Islanders. So we're going to have to find the money. And so, same thing there. Moved very quickly. Filed that case to Rhode Island. Got a restraining order in that case, or a temporary restraining order, or an injunction in that case. But here's the rub. And this is where another place I find hope. Places like New Hampshire, whose AGs are Republicans, who didn't join our lawsuits. They're not getting their $80 million in public health funding. So we're going to keep our $31 million. they're losing $80 million. So if you Google, or whatever you use, DuckDuckGo, or whatever is your search engine of choice, if you were to Google Boston Globe, New Hampshire Attorney General, you would find in yesterday's Boston Globe, in the New Hampshire section, they are all over the AG and the governor up there because they're giving up $80 million in funding because they didn't join this case. So what's my point? We have been very strategically conscious when we file these cases as to who we're helping and who we're not. So in the birthright citizenship cases where we pushed back against the executive order, which flouted the Constitution and said, if it's no longer the case that if you're born in this country, you're a citizen, regardless of your parents' legal status. We sought a nationwide injunction because we wanted a child born anywhere in the country, no matter whether your Attorney General is Peter Neronha or, I would argue the worst, Ken Paxton in Texas, the child was going to be a citizen when born. So we sought a national injunction there. But on these other funding cases, we have only sought a restraining order or an injunction for the states that sued, which is the 23 of us. So if you're in a red state and you get NIH funding, National Institutes of Health funding, well, we brought a case about that in Massachusetts and got an injunction there. Well, if you're in Alabama, you're screwed. Pardon the language. Some young people there, sorry. If you're in Alabama, you got a problem because you're not getting the money. And I think that's how we begin to turn the tide, right? As the terrorists begin to hit Americans everywhere, and the loss of funding starts to hurt Americans everywhere, and it's increasingly clear that what the president is about is chaos and helping his friends, and not everyday Rhode Islanders, and not everyday Americans. It's going to start to turn it around. But in the meantime, we got to fight. And through our lawsuits, we are helping to put pressure on those states, the elected officials in those states who have to go back to their constituents and say, hey, wait a minute, how come Rhode Island's getting their money and we're not getting ours, right? How come we're going to have to pay more state taxes or give things up when the blue states won't? If Trump is violating the law and the federal courts are agreeing, we're just giving up money because of what? So I think that it's going to take time, but I think the fight through the attorneys general will help turn the tide, along with just Americans' reaction to, listen, even if I voted for Trump, some Americans, I'm confident, will eventually, if they haven't already, had some buyer's remorse. And so that's, when I get up in the morning, somebody said to me the other day as I was going in to get lunch, Dee was with me and so was Blake, my chief of staff. They stopped me and they asked, well, you don't seem scared by this guy. And it just never occurred to me to be scared. This is what we do. This is what AGs do. We're lawyers. We're public lawyers. We're your lawyers. We fight. That's what we do. And so I find great personal satisfaction in that, as maybe you can tell. It's no question in my mind it's the right thing to do. I have a great team. And I'll leave you with this before we take questions. When we were in Los Angeles, and I travel now more than I used to because that's how we get together. And getting the 23 of us together is how we get on the same page. I have a pretty big ego, I'll be the first to admit it. But the bigger the state, the bigger the ego. So you can imagine what the New York Attorney General is like. The Suburban pulls up and 40 people pile out. Herding us cats is not easy. And my colleague in Washington, D.C., Brian Schwalm, is really doing a great job of organizing this. We talk 3 days a week. We talked this afternoon. We're going to talk again on Friday. We get on a Zoom and we talk through what's coming, what's next, what are we worried about, who's going to work on which case, because we divide the work up. That's why they're being filed in different states. But when we were in Los Angeles, we all went into the room, and I can't remember the issues we were dealing with, but it took a long time. It was 2 hours. When I walked out, I said to some people who were outside the conference room, the white smoke is going up, because we finally made a decision about something. But when I went back into the ballroom to get my backpack and my stuff from where we'd had the wider meetings, there were 20 assistant attorneys general from a whole bunch of states sitting around a conference room, that ballroom round table, with a laptop with a whole bunch of other assistant AGs who were clued in by Zoom. getting ready to bring the next case. And they're the source of hope for me. They're so talented. Like, we're talking about Dee graduated from Harvard undergrad, Columbia Law School, clerk for the Second Circuit. She doesn't have to do this work, but she does it because she believes in it and has spent her whole career doing it. She's an example of the kind of talent we have in the office, and that exists across the states. So when we had an argument in front of Judge McConnell in person, lawyers came in from New Jersey and Massachusetts and California together to argue that case. It's so impressive, and it's working. And look, people say, what does success look like? It's delaying Trump, frankly, long enough to minimize the damage, right? There's going to be damage. We're not going to win every case. But we can't just roll over. We can't be like some of these law firms, private law firms, that say, I'm going to give in to the president and do pro bono work for him. I mean, it's appalling. It's appalling. Some are standing up, like Wilmer Hale. And I believe, I think Jennerin Block is also standing up. I hope they're in the right category. I'm not getting them wrong.
Yes.
But they have to stand up. We all have to stand up. The protests that you're doing and have been engaged in, we have to stand up. As the president becomes more extreme, we have to continue to speak out, lend our voices, support the right candidates, and we, as attorneys general, have to and will continue to fight for you. Rob Bonta, I think, put it best. He's the AG in California. And he said, look, all of this is pressure on our staffs. As good as they are, they're working a lot of hours, and there's a lot of stress in these cases. They're tough cases. But Rob said, look, we're going to fight every fight, and we're just going to figure out how to do it. And that's the attitude. And the staffs feel the same way. And there's no hesitation to work through the weekend. The judges are working through the weekend. Judge McElroy issued a decision in one of our cases on Saturday. So, that is not the normal way that things work in our federal system. But the courts are living up to their obligations. They're doing the right thing because we really are right on the law. One of the things about being a public service lawyer is you try to bring cases that you truly believe in. It's different from being, and I was at a big law firm when I got out of law school, Goodman Proctor in Boston. It's different from representing a client that, you stay within the bounds of the rules, but it's, you've either got to defend them or you got to bring a claim on their behalf, and you do what you need to do. It's different from being, whether it be a federal or state prosecutor or a federal or state lawyer doing civil work. We're trying to get to the right thing. And that's why the courts are agreeing with us, because we're right. The Constitution says very plainly that if you're born in the United States, regardless of who your parents are, you're a citizen. And the president can't change the Constitution with the stroke of a pen. He can't take the congressional appropriations and change them with the stroke of the pen. That's not what our Constitution allows. And the courts are seeing that, and we're giving them the ammunition to agree with us. There's no better compliment than when the judges parrot back to you in their decisions what you argue to them. That's how you know you're getting it right, and we've seen a lot of that. So that's where I find hope. I find hope in you and the turnout tonight, which is beyond what I expected, and I'm so glad to see all of you. And just know that we're fighting for you. And we love the work. We're energized, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about anything. So we'll leave it there for now.